partners and especially the Iraqis. So your testimony will be used, I can assure you, to try to rectify it. Thank you so much. Ms. Bigelow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also have submitted a written statement, which we hope will be accepted, and I have a summary of those comments.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. My name is Kit Bigelow, Director of External Affairs of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. I would like to thank the subcommittee for asking us to testify about the situations of the Baha'i communities in Iran and Egypt. We would also like to thank Congress for its longtime support. It has passed 8 concurrent resolutions on the Iranian Baha'is. Congressmen Kirk and Lantos have just introduced H. Conres 415. We hope even more members will become co-sponsors and wish to express our gratitude to Congressmen Hyde and Smith, co-sponsors of several resolutions and main supporters in efforts to assist Iranian Baha'is. The Baha'i communities in Egypt and Iran are threatened by deliberate government strategies dedicated to their eventual destruction. In both cases, the situations have recently worsened. In Iran, where the Baha'i faith began in the 19th century, Baha'is are the largest religious minority with 300 to 350,000 people. The Islamic regime regards the Baha'i faith as apostasy and Baha'is as unprotected infidels with no legal rights. Since 1979, more than 10,000 have been dismissed from their jobs. Baha'is have been barred from institutions of higher education, and more than 200 Baha'is have been killed or summarily executed, and thousands more jailed. During the past 2 years, there has been an increase in arbitrary arrests, the destruction of historic religious sites, and other pressures of a type not experienced since the years immediately following the Islamic Revolution. More than 120 Baha'is await trial after having been imprisoned. A Baha'i died after 10 years in prison on charges of apostasy. The government-sponsored newspaper Kayhan has been running a campaign of vilification on the Baha'i faith. One of the most ominous signs of the government's intentions was exposed on March 20 this year and has been referred to by previous speakers. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief made public a confidential letter from Iran's armed forces calling for Baha'is to be identified and monitored. The Anti-Defamation League called these actions reminiscent of the steps taken against Jews in Europe. On May 19, 54 Baha'is were arrested in the city of Shiraz. It was one of the largest mass arrests of Baha'is since the 1980s. The Baha'i community in Egypt traces its roots to the 1860s. In 1925, a Supreme Religious Court of Cairo ruling was the first official recognition in the Muslim world of the Baha'i faith as an independent religion. In 1960, President Nasser signed Presidential Decree 263 banning Baha'i activities. The ban remains law today. Baha'is have faced several episodes of arrests and imprisonment, the most recent being in 2001, and remain under constant police surveillance. The Egyptian Baha'i community has diminished by 90% to 500 people. The Baha'i faith has been the subject of numerous fatwas. The most recent fatwa by the Islamic Research Academy of Al-Azhar University described the Baha'i faith as, quote, a lethal spiritual epidemic in the fight against which the state must mobilize all its contingencies to annihilate it, end quote. The crisis immediately before the Baha'is concerns identification cards that must be obtained by each Egyptian citizen by the end of 2006. The cards must be used for any type of government service and are needed to pass through police checkpoints. These cards require citizens to state one of Egypt's 3 recognized religions: Islam, Christianity, or Judaism. In the past, Baha'is had been permitted to leave the religious affiliation space blank, to make a dash, or to write other. On May 4 this year, an Egyptian administrative court found that Baha'is have the right to obtain government-issued documents that state their religion. The Ministry of the Interior appealed that ruling. The Supreme Administrative Court has suspended implementation of the ruling pending an appeal to be heard on September 16. In Egypt, the ultimate hope of the Baha'i community is the rescinding of Presidential Decree 263. Our plea is for that government to allow all of its citizens to be treated as equal. We appeal again to the Iranian government not to implement its plan to identify and monitor the Baha'is, and to permit them freely to practice their religion. In conclusion, we would like to thank the U.S. government for speaking out here and at the UN, and hope Congress will continue loudly to voice its concern for the religious freedom of all people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bigelow. And as we discussed earlier, I remember, and I was actually at the White House when President Reagan first began making the plight of the Baha'i, especially in Iran, a key issue for U.S. diplomacy. So I applaud you on your steadfast support for religious freedom in general, but especially for the Baha'i for all these years. And thank you for your testimony. Just a few questions, because all of your testimonies were very, very powerful and persuasive, and gives this subcommittee and the Congress, I think, much to do in follow-up. So I thank you for that. But basically, I would like to ask all of you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, the case of the Iranian Baha'is has been at the attention of the U.S. government for many, many years. President Reagan himself taking a very strong leadership role. And the role of the United States, particularly at the United Nations, because we do not have bilateral relations with Iran, it makes it much more challenging. And so the United States has been invaluable working with the EU, the Canadians and the Australians on resolutions at the United Nations. The Egyptian case is more recent and is now just becoming more public. And we are urging the U.S. government, whether it would be the White House or the State Department or Congress, to speak out more strongly about the situation that the Baha'is in Egypt face.
Let me just ask